Peter Katz.
Hi, Robin. All right. That was a solid 10 seconds I had to wait. But nice to see you. And it's a bit of a special day, isn't it, Robin?
Today is a very special day, and I need you to know, like, all of me was cringing having to go first, but I did it because you asked me to. Yeah,
Thanks, Robin.
that was tricky, Peter.
I just think that
You're
people
welcome.
deserve to hear your voice first sometimes too. And and we also hear the dogs in the background here. So life spills in sometimes, right?
Love it.
But
Absolutely.
you and I are we're celebrating that our podcast is actually out in the world, and I thought, I'm just having this thought right now in this moment, not something that I pre-planned, but I thought that we could just kind of process that for a second, the feeling of putting yourself out there. And I know certainly in my career, having released many albums, and I feel like I'm constantly putting myself out there. And I know that part of the process of putting myself out there is an intense amount of vulnerability, sometimes regret.
Yeah.
Just there's an intensity to it, and yet it's also one of the sources of greatest pride and greatest learning and growing. And I often find that by the time I put an album out, I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. But then that also shows me that I learned in the process, and now the next time I'll be able to kind of step up on that album and then make the next one. So I thought we could just talk for a moment for anyone out there who might be listening who's trying to put things out in the world, whether that's their own podcast, whether that's their own art, or whether that's just the way that they approach whatever it is that they do. It might be a new idea that they want to bring forward at the company that they work at, or a new way of parenting a child, or whatever that might be. I think we're all artists and creators, at least we all have that potential if we're willing to take those little risks and try to do new things. So how was the experience for you, Robin, of putting something out into the world? And I'd love to just hear from you.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. So I echo that sentiment that putting things out there, there's always that risk, because essentially we are going to run into judgment and people having opinions of things that we are putting out in the kind of that public domain. So yes, I echo that sentiment that we want to make sure what we're presenting, we want to, put our best foot forward, but in true intention. Like what we were trying to do with this podcast was we were launching it, essentially on the fly, in that sense of, not wanting it to be just perfect curated, everything scripted, and just everything kind of being as so many other parts I feel like our lives are, where there's kind of this idea that everything needs to fall into place and it has to be the right timing. And yesterday felt like this just warm affirmation that, start where you are. There'll never be a right time. And putting it out there and taking that brave step into the unknown is actually what matters most. And so I was so overwhelmed with the feedback from persons in community and even friends and colleagues who reached out. And they thought it was delightful. And again, similar in that sense of I could have said this differently. I might have been able to do that differently. But just embracing that messy middle, that kind of just getting out there and trying our best. And then hearing that actually some of the fact that it wasn't this perfect curated thing is what people actually felt resonated with them the most. And so again, I just hope it could be even this gentle offering that, there'll never necessarily be a right time. There never necessarily will be a time when things make sense, but taking that big, bold step and trying your best wherever it's at can actually yield some pretty special results.
I love that, Robin. I love that, and it is fun to get the feedback, and as I talk about a lot in my keynotes, we don't actually know most of the impact of the work that we do, and I hope there's more than 2 people out there listening, but it is nice when you do get some of that feedback back, and I got a beautiful message from my best friend who's overseas right now doing a kind of a major surgery for her husband, and she sent me a beautiful note, and she said, like, it's like I got to spend half an hour with you and get to know you better, and so that's really special to think that those little moments are happening, and that we don't know about them. And I think that's just my encouragement for everybody. Again, I'm biased as somebody who's kind of always putting things out into the world, but I really love the process of like putting everything I can into it, right? Like it's like I remember in a past episode I was referencing at somebody I had interviewed in preparation for a talk, where he said, I'm doing the best I can with what I have today, and I kind of feel the same way about creating. Is like, okay, this is like the best that I can do. This is the best that I know so far, and just trusting that by releasing that, again, with your best effort. It's not about just sort of like willy-nilly. It is with still lots of intent and care. But that's kind of how you learn and grow and figure it out. And I think it's a special thing. And so I just hope everybody else out there is willing to just kind of take those little risks and feel the vulnerability, but also feel the growth and the learning and the unexpected impacts that can happen as a result of doing it.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm just my heart's smiling knowing that a friend of yours in, a challenging situation right now far away was able to just get that comfort of hearing you talk, Peter, to be in dialogue, to hear you reflect and to think and to share, because I know, and I've said this before, like you just have this beautiful capacity to just ground ideas. And even as soon as I hear you, I see you, my nervous system's like, oh, we get to exhale now. And I think so often we're like just going and we're doing and we're pushing, but to be able to find that balance point where we're able to like challenge ourselves, but in a way that's supportive. And I just think that is just a really kind of beautiful kind of dichotomy to explore, where we are pushing ourselves, we're taking risks, we're being vulnerable, but when we do it in the right place, in the right environment, it can actually be like safe and supportive. So it's not that we have to like, put our head and our heart on a clothesline for everyone to see. Yeah. It's that idea that, we can put ourselves in those places, but if you're doing it with the right people, if you're doing it with the right intentions, if you're doing it in the right way, I just wholeheartedly believe like good wins every time.
Yeah. I love that. I think we might have talked about this in the past. I'm not sure. We've had so many conversations, but like to give yourself those like lily pads or those islands, those little things to kind of ground yourself. So you're taking the risk, but it's like, okay, what are the people that I can put around me that make me feel comfortable, or maybe it's the warm tea or something. Like what are the things that I can do to kind of allow myself that exhale that you just described? Like I'm still going to do this thing, I'm still going to take this risk or put that thing out there or have the conversation that I need to have or whatever it is, but how can I resource myself a little bit with the things that give me that stability, and then that gives me the strength and courage to take the little leap.
I love the lily pad analogy. That's beautiful. One of the ways we also talk about that in my work, Peter, is the power of cope ahead of time. And often we are doing like reaction, like we're trying to like manage the things after they've happened, and then we're reactive to it versus, so for example, yesterday, knowing that, I've wanted to do a podcast for so long because I just wanted this opportunity to do free flow discussion, that it doesn't always have to, follow an agenda, and it doesn't always have to fit within the parameters of some of the work that I do. And I've always wanted to do this, yet I never felt ready until we had that conversation in Halifax. And I knew in that moment, I thought, if I was going to take this big bold step towards an audacious goal, I want to do that with Peter Katz. Like, he's the person that I want to do this with. And then yesterday, knowing that we're now going to share this kind of bit of it's a wee bit left of center. Like, there's not a lot of other podcasts that kind of have this free flow format. And so knowing that we were going to put that out yesterday, I was already thinking about like that cope ahead of time. So what do I need to do to make sure that, if, perhaps like, there was hiccups or there was tech issues, or if like something didn't go as planned, or perhaps it doesn't resonate with some folks and people need to share that. Okay, so how am I going to manage those thoughts and those feelings? And one of the things I've learned about myself through reflection is like my ego is usually the one that makes it like worse when some of the things don't go as planned. It's the little bruised ego that doesn't want to hear negative feedback, or to hear it wasn't perfect, or to hear, I know you said it to me lovingly, that we can't listen to you at 1.5 speed, Robyne, because you are now not even like, we can't even make sense of the words you say. So it's my little ego. And one of the kind of little ways that I work with the ego, because I think the ego writes these stories for us, Peter, and we suffer more there than I think we actually ever do in the real world. And so I had this little moment where I had like, before that was going to launch and I knew what time it was going to drop, I had this moment where I was like, okay, ego, I need you to be my amigo on this one. And whatever comes our way, stand beside me. Don't stand in front of me and judge me. Right? Like, stand beside me and help me like hear what I need to hear, learn what I need to learn, be open to what I need to do to grow and learn in this moment. And so I had this like little pep talk with my little ego and decided to invite him to be my amigo in this moment and let me kind of work through any of those hiccups. So then that way it was just made it so it was much more of a pleasurable experience because I knew I was prepared.
I love that that ego amigo. That's a good nugget right there. And I mean, what I appreciate about what you're saying is that sometimes that critical voice that comes up, right, which can be paralyzing, which can stop us from doing something. And sometimes the voice is in ourselves, and sometimes the voice is coming from other people. Certainly, when you're putting things out into the world, sometimes there's many an opinion out there. And I feel like what you're highlighting is there may be some wisdom to be gained from what your ego might be yelling about or whatever. And so this is something that I've been doing kind of my whole life, putting things out into the world, is making sure before I sort of get feedback from anybody else or even from my own ego, or it's like asking myself, okay, so what is true here, and what is not. So, like, like am I talking too fast? Right, I'm using that example. Right, it's like can I sort of objectively just ask myself, like, okay, how, like, is that something that I feel is true, and can I take that information in without hating on myself that maybe I was talking quickly, or seeing like, I was excited, or whatever that might be. Or for me, yes. I told you before we hit record that when I did my first radio interview, I listened back to it and I said and and I had all those in between words, and so part of me felt the shame and the embarrassment and all that kind of stuff. And also it was a learning opportunity where I was like, okay, I'm proud of myself for having done this interview, and in the future, I would like to say and less, and that's true. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm so conscious of like, am I saying like, am I saying people are like, yeah, you're saying that all the time. I was like, oh, so like, what is true about the situation? What can I let in objectively without hating on myself for the fact that I did that? Take the moment, learn, gain the wisdom, and then kind of let go of the rest of the packaging that it's wrapped in, all the styrofoam and cellophane and all the crap that's around it. What's the nugget that I want to take away, and what's the part that I can just let go of?
Yeah, Peter, that's a beautiful way of describing it, where it's like there might be something there. Doesn't mean there's always something there, but there could
Mm-hmm.
be a piece of feedback that actually could enhance our understanding of ourselves, or how we're doing our work, or how we want to, adapt or improve or expand, which I love. I also really appreciate your kind of how you drew that out with, like, wrapped in all the other stuff. And I just think, even when, for example, when we do an online order, and something comes and there's like a box, and then there's paper, and then there's all this other stuff, and those little potato things in there now, and it's like, okay, but really, what are we getting at here? Like, what
Right.
is it that we're really hearing or talking about? And like, just taking that pause, I think, which, when we're so busy, it's hard to do. And it's quicker to pick up the offense than it is to pick up the lesson, right? It's easier for us to pick up the parts that we're like, oh, they don't understand, or we get really critical, versus, okay, like, what are we actually talking about? Or what is actually something that we need to be present for or be open to? It reminds me as well that I talk about this actually in my work, about that idea that, like, I have a very fractured relationship with feedback, because historically, especially in a work setting, I've experienced feedback that, like, was not constructive. It wasn't meant to enhance the learning, to create supportive work environments. It was, at times there was gaslighting. At times the intention was to do harm, to create insecurities. So when I'm in situations where feedback is happening, it's really normal that my first response is to either, decide first that the person who gives me feedback, I decide quickly, I just don't like them anymore, right? Like, my first response is like, oh, thank you, now I don't like you. And then it's like, my second response is to avoid those difficult conversations, or to discount whatever they're saying, and not at all, because it's a coping mechanism, because I haven't experienced a lot of experiences, again, in a professional setting, when the feedback was actually meant how it should be delivered. So one of the things I can share with you, I've learned, that I find really helpful, is when, especially if somebody's working with someone like me who doesn't always take feedback well, because I internalize it so deeply, is to connect before you correct. Right? Just take that pause to, like, connect with the person, to say, like, how are you? Like, are you up for feedback right now? And
Yeah.
when I'm in, like, kind of what we refer to as a lower self place, where I'm not feeling 100%, that might not be the time, or I might
Yeah.
not be in the headspace. So again, that connect before you correct, I find extremely helpful.
That seems like a really useful tool for parenting as well. I'm not a parent yet, aspiring, but I can really imagine that that being a great note. There's a couple of other threads I want to pull on. One, in what you were just saying too, this idea of distinguishing between opinion and counsel, and
Oh, I like
opinions are abundant, and people have opinions on your finances, and on all different things.
Yep.
But
Everything.
counsel is like, okay, this person is somebody who has maybe walked the path that I want to walk, or has achieved something I want to achieve, or carries themselves in a way that I would like to carry myself. And so I'm going to go to them for counsel with intention, and maybe I'm going to ask, like, again, this is just sort of from my world, writing songs and doing kind of the work that I've done as a performer, is like, who are you getting that opinion from? I'm not really interested in opinions. I'm interested in counsel. I'm interested in finding
I love that.
mentorship. And I think it's really important to ask specific questions, like, in what category am I looking for counsel on? Because sometimes certainly in a creative process, there's a time where you kind of just want to be with it. You don't want to muddy the waters any further. Like, you're already in kind of muddy waters in a creative process, and you don't need other people kind of cannonballing into the lake right there. And you can kind of lose the magic of it if you let too many people in all at once there. So that's something that I think about too, is is like, okay, this is just an opinion. So somebody has an opinion, and to me, it just can kind of like roll off like, water on the duck's back or whatever the expression is. And then who are those select people that I want to go for counsel in the moment where I first have checked in with myself, where it's not like I'm not going to get validation. I'm not going to just like make myself feel better about myself. Which again, I think can live in the opinion category, right? We can get people just be like, oh, this is great. Yeah. But it's like, no, okay, I feel like I've got this thing to a point, and now I need some counsel on a specific aspect of it, and I'm going to go to that person that I'm willing to listen to and get that trusted counsel from. So something that I certainly think about a lot in my own life. I have one other thread I want to pull on, but do you have any research or thoughts around that point, Robyne?
It's a great point. You're making a great point. I want to hear your second thread, so please continue.
Okay. Well, the other thread that I think is really, I think of could be a lot of value for people in what you were talking about, one, in the idea of us doing this podcast together. But what also listeners might not know is there were other people behind the scenes that made this whole thing possible. And you and I were reflecting earlier that as the podcast was released yesterday, we both sort of had this sense of wonder / guilt, like because it unfolded, right? You and I, we've just showed up and spoken to each other. Like we just showed up and talked, and I realized we forgot to do our check-in at the beginning of this episode. Where are you, Robyne? And what are you about to do?
I'm in Toronto, and I'm about to do a gigantic keynote at the Toronto Convention Center in about an hour. That's where I am, Peter.
Right.
And where are you?
Well, I'm up in rural Ontario, and then right after this, I'm going to get in my car, and I have like a series of meetings and events and stuff like taking me all the way to like 10:30 tonight, and it's 10 a.m. right now. So I'm going to be in this. There's like no gaps, and so as we've talked about before, like we are just catching each other in time, right? Where our job in this process is to show up and talk to each other. Now, historically, for me, I would have been also doing editing and also looking at the copy, and like I would have been like having my hands over every little bit of it. But you and I decided that we're gonna focus on this part, and we're gonna empower and trust other people to help the rest of it unfold. And so it really reminds me of kind of one of my biggest learnings and one of my biggest growth edges over the last year, I would say. As I read a book by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy called Who, Not How. And maybe we've talked about this before, but it's worth recapping again, if not, that in life, when we're trying to take things on, we so often go to the how, and it's disempowering. It's like, I'm gonna launch a podcast. Well, I don't know about microphones, and I don't know how do you publish a podcast, and what show notes, like how am I going to do all this, and I don't know how to edit these things, and then we get paralyzed by the how. Whereas if you look for the who, you realize that there's other people out there that love to do the thing that you don't love to do or you don't know how to do, and you're actually giving them a gift by allowing them to contribute and do that thing, right? So I've always wanted to do a podcast too. In fact, I recorded some demos of a podcast, but it was just me by myself, and it was daunting, and it was never going to happen. And then you said, I'd love to do a podcast with you, and you all of a sudden became the who for me. And what you've said is I'm the who for you, and we each bring different things to this process, and all of a sudden there's an easefulness in getting a podcast out into the world. And we have these people that we've empowered who are out there doing it. And maybe people have this voice in their head of like, oh yeah, that's fine for Robyne and Peter, but like I can't afford to hire somebody, or like there might be those voices of like no, I can't do that. But it's amazing when you create the invitation and the opportunity, there's people at all budget levels, at all
Yes.
capacities that want to rise up and have that opportunity. And so we actually deny others the ability to contribute and to be part of something by trying to do it all ourselves. So I, for one, feel proud of us. And again, the lesson and the encouragement for anybody listening is, like, if there's those things in your life that you want to do and we're bogged down by the how, who are the people that might be able to help in that process, and they get to do the thing that they love, and they get to be part of something that supporting something that the parts that you don't want to do, but they want to do them. So it's a beautiful thing that's possible.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And again, I'm so appreciative that we can hold space to give a shout out to all of the people who participated in putting this together and continue to participate. And I'm so appreciative. And what I love is that if one person was to try, like you described, Peter, where all hands on deck in terms of you being the only person, that sole incumbent, who is going to try to do something from start all the way to, like, launch, there's an enormous amount of work. But all of a sudden, when we share that load, which is something we all know makes sense, is that, we share that load, and then each person's doing their small part, it isn't this major output for anyone. It's like we're like collaborating in this way where we all do our part, and then all of a sudden we have something we can all be really proud of and pleased with how it came together. And again, it wasn't, overwhelming for any one person because we've shared it. So to do that kind of that delegating, which I know is so challenging to do for so many of us to delegate, yet we know that, like, when we come together, the outcome and the product and the accountability is going to be that much higher. And I remember recently being at an event and we were talking, and I wish I could, like, attribute this correctly to who said this quote. So perhaps if somebody knows who said this quote, please feel free to share it with me. But they basically said something to the effect of, there's not a single person in this room that is smarter or more capable than us as a collective. Right. So, like, and I used the example when I was sharing this with another group where it's like, so imagine like you go to trivia, right? A trivia game.
Yeah.
And it's just you and you go to trivia, right? I'm sure you'll hold your own, right? I know you will. But can you imagine if you went to trivia with like 100 people and you were on one team? Like, right. I just can't even imagine how there wouldn't be someone in that 100 who would know whatever that answer was, right? Like, we'll always be stronger and more capable with more capacity in group. Yet, I feel as though so many of us, just like I have a fractured relationship with feedback, I also think a lot of us have a fractured relationship with group work, right? With collaborating, right? Like, even just, I know when I say to my students, we're going to do a group assignment, you can hear the cringing. It's just like, no, let me just lone wolf this. Let me just do it by myself. Yet I just love that I'm hoping, and again, that's an edge for me to be learning about as well, getting back to when we do things in community, when we do things in groups, it will always work out better. Always. I've yet to see something that it's like, no, do this solely by yourself and have no one to celebrate it with, and that's going to feel good.
Yeah, and certainly there are things that one can do to help make sure that there's a good group process. I'm thinking, about the work, the facilitation work that I do, and we talk about how do you get into cycles of creativity and cycles of instead of cycles of reactivity, and certain questions that we ask, even environmental things about, like, how is the room organized, and I could get real nerdy on this. We could do a whole other episode. But yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, and certainly I was the person that always hated when the teacher said that it was going to be group work. And I think just like so many things in life, that served me for a period of my life, and then as I wanted to do other things and take on bigger things or take on more things, I've had to learn to let go and trust others, and like I literally went to our website, hereintime.ca, and I'm like looking at this website. I had nothing to do with this. I'm reading the show notes. I'm like, this is great. The episodes were all given titles. I was like, that's a great title. Like I had no say in that, and I was utterly thrilled. And so just shout out to Trevor and to Jenna and to who else was involved on your side, Robyne?
Yeah, on my side too, we had Aaron involved. Jeff got involved with linking things up, and and I think
Amazing.
Sean was involved as well. So
Sean,
we're very appreciative for the team.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's just so amazing to have these people behind the scenes doing all this great work. All right, I'm mindful of our time here. I did have a great question for you, Robyne. We're at 30 minutes. Should we take
I have a
2
question
minutes, or
too.
do you have to go to your keynote?
No, let's do this. Can we take?
Okay.
I have a good question for you.
All right,
You go
would you like
first.
to go first? Okay. Well, you went first with saying hello, so I will go first this time. Okay, Robyne, this is a slight kind of visualization. So I've often shared about my little kind of mini refueling, re-energizing, re-grounding moments where I love to go and sit in the sun with a coffee and take 15 minutes even in the middle of a very busy day. So here's what I'd love for you to picture, Robyne, and you can set the scene.
Okay.
But so picture yourself on a park bench in like a beautiful location that brings you a lot of joy, and I invite you to paint that picture as well. But you've got 15 minutes on this park bench, and you've got some magical powers, so you can put in your hands whatever you want. You can reach into your magic bag and pull anything out that you'd like. What would you do with those 15 minutes?
The first thought that came to me, Peter, is I would imagine my older dog who's passed away years ago, Tycho. She's a chocolate lab. And if I had magic, I would want to introduce her to my chocolate lab that I have now named Luna. And in that moment, I would love to see them play Chasey Chase in the park. I wish Luna knew Tycho, and I wish Tycho knew Luna, because they are such kindred little spirits. I think even though they obviously never met each other, they had different times when they were here. But if I had magic and I was in a bench and I had 15 minutes, I would love to see my Tycho play with Luna.
That's so beautiful. I'm right now we have 2 dogs here because Tess, she has her dog Lily and her dad's dog Buddy. They're away on vacation, so we have Buddy, and they're both cockapoos. And actually Lily kind of helped raise Buddy. He was a rescue, and when Tess first got him, he would like hide under the table, and you'd feed him like one bit of kibble at a time. And so when they're reunited, it's a special thing to see sort of the elder dog having kind of raised the younger dog, and sometimes the younger dog does things to the older female dog that siblings would never do, but that's a whole other story. I'll leave that right there.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking that question, because that was just, I've never actually articulated how much I wish my puppy who passed could play with my present puppy. And that just brought me this like envisioned joy. And so thanks for asking that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Pete, you're welcome. I'm glad you just told us about Lily and Buddy, because I was almost crying. And I was
crying too
hold
there.
It together.
So.
Hold it together. Hold it together. Oh, those pesky feelings. I almost caught a feeling there, Peter. Whew,
Can't have that,
That
Robyne.
happened.
You know me.
Oh,
I hate
goodness.
feelings. Yeah.
I know. God, we got to put those in our muscles and train harder.
Exactly.
Okay, so the question I have for you, and again, I'm mindful of time, but Peter, just in this moment, and I know this kind of goes with what we were talking about like feedback and putting things out there. So this is my question for you in this moment. What piece of feedback do you need to hear right now? What piece of feedback does Peter need to hear right now?
Wow. It's funny. As soon as I have the immediate words, like they come to me right away. And then as soon as I hear the words, I immediately dismiss them. We do these different parts of ourselves.
Yes.
So because the words that came to me were like that you're going to be okay. Because I've just been in a time of just a lot of big things, happening. Just in all these wonderful successes professionally, and then a lot of big kind of personal growth edges, which maybe I'll share about more another time. I'm not hiding them or anything, but wouldn't want to open the can with overtime here. But I am happy to talk about them. Just that feeling of that sort of that what I've created in my life, that it's impossible for it to all disappear. And I think I have this feeling of, well, that was a nice ride, and but really I'm an imposter, and I'm getting away with something, and it's all just a big illusion, and I'm going to be sort of found out. And so I think just to have that gentle counsel of, this is real, and you are real, and this is not some fluke of accidents, but that you are held, and that you are okay. That would be nice to receive and to allow in. To receive and receive.
To allow. Oh, Peter, thank you for... I know they're not meant to be Peter confessionals, but these moments like this are just they're just so special. And I appreciate just your bravery for sharing, because I do believe when we do ask that question, like, what feedback do I need to hear right now? That's like this little switch in our brain that says, like, let me tell you, Robyne, what it is that I need to hear right now. And it gives us this like little window into our heart and our soul. So thank you for that. And I want to hold space that, like, next time we connect, I so want to, like, not just pull on strings. Like, I want to, like, we're going to just like tear that whole thing out in terms of that feeling of, that other foot is going to drop, or like something's going to go wrong. And that is something that I feel as though so many of us carry, but we don't talk about it. So I would love to set the intention that next time we connect and join wherever we are in time and space, that we talk about the Jonah complex, and we talk about this fear of our own greatness, because it's real. And I can tell you, Peter, you are as real as it gets. And I would love to have that conversation. And I hope folks will join us next time for that conversation, because it's one that I think I need to hear, and perhaps some other folks might need to hear it too.
I love that, Robyne. Thank you. Received. And also, that will have been the most planning we've ever put into an episode to have so everybody just bore witness to our planning meeting right there. So there it is.
That was right there.
Yeah, that was it.
One agenda item. Item. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, there you go. Thank
Beautiful.
you, Peter.
All right. Well, I know you have a talk to get to, and I've got my day here. So this has been a really special treat. Thanks to you, Robyne. Thanks to all of you listening. And thanks to all of our who's out there who are helping to make this episode and all of these shows possible.